In a minute or two, we'll start to read through all these verses on these notes on the Proverbs. So I thought I would mention, if you didn't catch one on the way in, kind of raise your hand and maybe somebody can bring you one. Maybe everybody has one. That'll be good. The Bible can be used to make a textbook on almost every subject. It's obviously history. We could do psychology. We could do sociology, as in marriage and the family. But some have made a textbook out of Bible verses on political science. That can be done. One angle would be to look at the history of the country and the Constitution and apply the Bible to it. Another way is just to look at the Bible itself and say all aspects of political science. We can't go through all that today. I thought we would just do some of the verses out of the Proverbs. Relative to our founding, correctly understood and originally understood, the country does believe in the separation of church and state. I know sometimes Christians say it didn't, but properly understood, it did. The European countries have state churches. And in the centuries before, that was the only church that was approved. And the government got to pick the bishops, and the government got to pick the pastors. And anybody who didn't agree or be a part of that group, they would be not really allowed to be a pastor, not really allowed to have a church. And in state churches, people are forced to pay taxes to support a church. So in the start of the United States, properly defined, it did believe in the separation of church and state. That is, the government shouldn't tell churches what to do. And the government shouldn't make people go to their chosen church or even read out of their chosen book of prayer and do it the way the government says. There was separation of church and state. And that's not the same thing as separation of government from ethics or government from Christian ethics. To impose a morality, say like the right to life or the proper view of marriage, that's not the same thing as making anybody go to any church. That's not the same thing as forcing people to pay taxes for a church. It's just the overlap of ethics and law. Some form of ethics will be legislated into law. It'll either be Christian ethics or pagan ethics. But some form of ethics gets legislated into law because so many political issues overlap with ethical issues. We have every right to say whatever we want to say on it. So the separation of church and state, originally defined, just means the government can't make a person go to church, can't make a person pay for church. But that's got nothing to do with ethical issues that are political issues. And Christians have every freedom of speech, so we can say whatever we want on it. We can give our conclusions. And hopefully there would be enough to have our conclusions respected. We did Romans 2 last time. That had natural law in it. Natural law argues that even unsaved people know right from wrong. They know wrong when it's done to them. They know thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. They know it when it's done to them. When they are the victims, they know it is wrong. And actually, natural law ought to be political law. In some 4th of Julys, we give a lot of quotes of the originators of the United States. That's good. I decided not to do that today. I thought we would look at King Solomon and what he had to say about running a country, or sometimes he uses the word city. So please come with me to a list of verses from Proverbs, and if we didn't have a list, we probably wouldn't get through it, but we can work our way faster when all the verses are before us. And we'll read each one and make a few comments on each one. Let's look at Proverbs 11. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there is glad shouting. By the mouth of the wicked, that is the city or the society, is torn down. Happy shouting when evil leaders die. Well, don't really have any recordings of how people felt when Hitler died, and Mussolini died, and Stalin died. But I'm sure if we did a little bit of work, we could find recordings. And the Americans were all very happy when they died. And this is a true but an odd statement. When they're gone, they're gone. Probably never go again. But I've been to the Kremlin. I've been to Stalin's tomb. And the Russian tour guide was fascinating. We have to be here, he said, but there lies an evil man. So, even they had some sort of rejoicing that he is gone. Looking at the final phrase of this passage, the mouth of the wicked tears down a city. Why, we would think it'd be the bulldozers. We would think, it might be a storm tears down the city. The mouth of the wicked is what tears down a society. Interesting line. Now let's read the next one, 14:28 of Proverbs. In a multitude of people is a king's glory, but the dearth of people is a prince's ruin. And that brings to mind the thought of all these unwanted and killed children. I can't even hardly keep track of how many. 80 million maybe, be a good guess, over time, since it became, quote, legal, even though it's immoral. Fewer and fewer. Keep it up. We'll be like some of the European countries that don't have enough kids, or like Japan that don't have enough kids. The Bible's conclusion of that is it just brings it to ruin. Do they really think there's no room? I think about that a lot when I drive around. Michigan's the same way. Once you get out of Detroit, it's all woods. New York's woods out of New York City. And out here, for heaven's sakes, there's room for all kinds of people. I don't know who wouldn't know that. And this is telling us to destroy all those kids. That is a ruin of a country. Often we don't have the scripture reading the same verse that we're going to look at, but I thought Proverbs 14:34 was so important. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Exalt, shall we say, rises higher and higher, but sin is disgraceful, shameful, appalling. Proverbs 16, let's do both passages of Proverbs 16 together. Verse 10, a divine decision is in the lips of the king. His mouth should not err in judgment. And then verses 12 and 13, it is abomination for kings to commit righteousness, for a throne is established on righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and he who speaks right is loved. Well, the way it's supposed to be is any political leader is supposed to give God's truth. What they should be repeating and what they should be promoting is God's truth. And should listen to advisors and citizens who give God's truth. Here, evil people pronounce what is evil. Abomination is an Old Testament word. We'd say disgusting. I kind of think of Revelation 3, where it's lukewarm and makes a person sick. That's probably how God responds to it. Also, picture a throne. We don't have thrones in the United States, but picture a throne that just totters all over the place. ready to collapse, ready for the leg to fall off. But he who speaks what is right is loved. People agree with it. The reverse would be a leader who speaks what is evil will be unloved. Think about evil people giving speeches. They're unloved by righteous people, but I think in the end they're loved by everybody. When you have a large evil system, the leader will speak evil, but in the end the evil people turn on the evil leader. They think they're going to get acceptance. It'll be something. Righteous people are loved, says the verse. Unrighteous people are unloved. We will go by 2028 because it's very similar to what we already read. Loyal love and faithfulness preserve a king, and the throne won't totter by righteousness. It will be solid. It will be stable. Otherwise, it's tipsy and falls over. Let's look at Proverbs 21. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the hearts. They always think they're right. That's the last sentence. The first sentence is God can kind of send a leader in the direction that he wants. God is in ultimate control. Sometimes he makes people do things that are leaders, and sometimes it's surprising. Other times he allows it. He might permit a leader to do what is wrong. Either way, I think this verse helps us because God controls it. He might cause a decision. We have a hard time knowing when he causes a decision, but he might allow it. And sometimes we just can't control it ourselves. We just have to say, God, you're in control of this. You will cause it. You will allow it. We will do what is right. We will try to take care of families. We'll try to take care of friends. We'll try to take care of the neighborhood. Start inward, go out as far as possible. But in the end, God's in control. And God might cause the country to turn around, or God might let it fall into ruins. In the end, we just have to believe God is in control. And that helps with that verse, that he's in control, even with the leaders. The next passage is often about gluttony. It's used that way, but that's not the only teaching. It's Proverbs 23. When you sit down to dine with a ruler, consider carefully what is set before you. Put a knife to your throat if you're a man of great appetite. Do not desire the delicacies, for it is deceptive food. Well, it's been a while since I read about the 7 deadly sins in a Catholic book on it, and gluttony is one of them, and well, okay. On the other hand, the real teaching of this is the last phrase, deceptive food. There are all kinds of organizational banquets and parties. But we have to beware of the get-together or the convention wants to do what is true and wants to do what is right. It's not just a get-together or a convention that has a good banquet or has, spunky music or show-off teachers and speakers. This is telling us, beware of deceptive food. Beware of what the real goal of the organization is. Beware of what the leader really wants to do. Is it biblical or is it evil? So it doesn't really so much matter whether the munchies are good. So they can have them. I have to leave names out of this, and I'll do it here and I'll do it again, but there have been politicians come to town and give speeches, and you're welcome to go. I cleaned the backyard. I actually said to Marilyn, I'm going to do something important today. I'm going to go pick out weeds. Because it doesn't matter if the food is good. Now, I have talked with people that have personally had dinner with a president in private. And I've been to speeches where somebody on a staff was all the time setting up speeches for the president. And in both cases, the person that had dinner with the president, he was a pastor, but he didn't say a thing when he got there. And knowing what denomination he's from, I'm not surprised. But he didn't say a thing, nothing. He was having a private dinner with the president, didn't say anything. And Chuck Colson, years ago, came to college and gave a speech, and he said before he was saved, he could not believe the responses of the pastors and Christian leaders. That once they got into the presence of the president, everything they thought was true and talked about and complained about, nothing got brought up. Because once they were there, it was silence. And just pay attention to the leader. We're going to have more verses on this. You tell them what they want to hear. Very, very common to say nothing. Now we go to 25, verse 2. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to search out a matter. I would think this would be all kinds of things. In the Proverbs, it would be a good leader wants to find out what is right and what is wrong and what is true and what is error. Although there's a whole another category where a good leader wants to find out what is smart to do. And very often, projects are so complicated, you have to work a little bit to find out whether that's really smart if the full facts are known. Good leaders want the full facts before they make a decision. And good leaders search out truth from error. Well, now we get to chapter 25. It's about you tell them what you want to hear, kind of king, and then it'll repeat and say some more. Let's look at 25, 5 through 7. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Do not claim honor in the presence of the king, and do not stand up in the place of great men. For it is better that it be said of you, come up here, that you should be put lower in the king's presence of the prince, whom your eyes have seen. Well, reversing verse 5 is if there's all kinds of wicked advisors and wicked counselors, the throne will totter. But if you have righteous advisors and righteous counselors, and the leader is open to them, then the throne will be established. A different idea is try to show respect in the presence of powerful people. Very often, I'm not in their presence. Very often I do letters, a lot of them. But I learned a long time ago, this is a little bit of showing respect, but I look for anybody on the staff that is a Christian. And I look especially for anybody on the staff that's a preacher's kid. And I found a few of them. It'd be surprising. We're all secretaries there are that are pastors' children. So I've done this with world famous people. I won't give their name, you know that, but I first talk with a preacher's kid. Hey, you're in here for a purpose. Will you pass along these things to so-and-so? It has always worked. So that's a little bit of trying not to be pushy. I think that in terms of leaders, it's best to show respect and best to start out with the attitude we're trying to help, and then it often works. I think probably a bullhorn in their face will not work. And this is saying kind of take it slow, which I think is the right way to do it. Take it slow and it might work. Now, Proverbs 28. Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive with them. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all things. Let's look at verse 4 again. Here's your choice. Praise the wicked or fight with them. There's a leader's choice. Either tell them they're a bunch of wonderful people or tell them they're wrong and fight with them. The good politicians in America are doing this. They're constantly striving with the wicked. That's basically a choice. Anyone who is a leader, you'll have this choice. You give in to the wicked, you say how wonderful they are, you praise the wicked, or you fight them. There is the choice. And that shows a good leader from a bad leader. Verse 12 of Proverbs 28, when the righteous triumph, there is great glory, but when the wicked rise, men hide themselves. I think probably there wasn't any fireworks in the definition of glory in the Bible, but that'll fit. Celebrations and decor and artwork and people getting together, righteousness. At least in our case, we're remembering efforts at righteousness, remembering past righteousness. If it's real wicked, people hide. I haven't driven through South Chicago in decades. To get to Michigan, the fastest way is to go through South Chicago. But that's our way of hiding. Don't want anything to do with it. Fortunately, where we live, we're more in the safety where there can be people getting together and there can be glory and not have to hide yet. And we hope it stays that way. Now, will you please turn over for the last few of them, of Proverbs. More on hiding in verse 28, but also I'd like to stress something new. When they perish, the righteous increase. And let's also read from Proverbs 29. When the righteous increase, the people rejoice. When a wicked man rules, people groan. They perish. That'd be the new part I'd like to stress. They perish. Whatever leaders we have in any federal, state, local, whatever time, it's limited. It's not going to go on forever. Asaph had this thought in Psalm 73. His feet almost slipped when he saw the prosperity of the wicked. Prosperity could be income. Prosperity could be high position. How'd they get there? How did they get to that place? But then it says he perceived their end. It says he went into the sanctuary of God, means he went into the temple of Solomon, and he perceived their end, and their feet were on slippery places. So Proverbs 28 is reminding leaders there will be limits, and they will be judged. There will be an end to it. They will perish. But also, when they do, it gives hope for the people they have led. It says, the righteous rejoice. There might be a flip. It can go back and forth. It might be a flip. Verse 4, the king gives stability to the land by justice, but a man who takes bribes overthrows it. So far, we can deal with ethical topics in here, And the IRS will be okay with it as long as we don't name names or give political parties. So you can think on your own who might be guilty of taking bribes. But think about bribes. Bribes would be for financial decisions, and bribes could be for court decisions. Financial decision, the bribe would be give the contract to so-and-so, give the government contract to them, even though they're not as competent. Or a court decision will be, here's a big bribe, and so an innocent person can be convicted and a guilty person can be set free. If there's too much of that, it falls apart. Decisions aren't based on what is wise and what is careful, how to spend money, just wasted. Or decisions in court are done wrong. Verse 12, if a ruler pays attention to falsehood, all his ministers become wicked. In other words, it starts with giving them what they want to hear, but eventually people who do what is right are banned. And then the person hears what they want to hear, but that's all they hear, because there's more and more of them. In the book of Kings, Ahab and Jehoshaphat want to get together and fight the Syrians, and all the false prophets say, go and you'll win. And one got iron horns out and you're going to push the enemies around. Isn't there just one more we can talk with? Yeah, there is. I hate him. He never says what's right. He never says anything nice to me. Micaiah comes out, 1 Kings 22:14, as the Lord has spoken, that I will speak. So he tells him, you go to that battle, you're going to be in trouble. And the king says, put him back in jail and feed him sparingly, bread and water. And he goes out and he gets shot by an arrow. The more false leaders there are, the more they are. And they push out good people. And, well, that story illustrates what happened. Now, chapter 29. The fear of man brings a snare, but he who trusts the Lord will be exalted. Many seek the ruler's favor, but justice for a man comes from the Lord. I always think of John 19, well, they love the approval of men rather than the approval of God. What matters is that we get God's approval. And the other part is turn justice over to God. I think our local courts are trying to be fair. Yeah, I do. But sometimes there is injustice, and sometimes things can't be fixed. There just isn't enough evidence to fix it. And what this is saying is when it's wrong, do what you can and then turn it over to God. Because He'll make it right in the end. He'll make justice in the end. The next text, it's kind of like a parade. We don't have any kings in our local parades, but a stately march, a king when his army is with him. Finally, we'll read Proverbs 31, which is real close to the Mother's Day text. Remember, you get Proverbs 31, you get to verse 10, a virtuous woman who can find. Well, this is just before that. And we don't know who King Lemuel was. He's not a Jewish king, but he's learned from his mother. Proverbs 31. The words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mothers taught him. Do not give your strength to women, or your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, lest they drink and forget what is decreed and pervert the rights of the afflicted. So there's a good mother telling a little boy, you're going to be king someday, and stay away from the wild women. They're going to have secrets on you. Nowadays they have pictures. I mean, people should know that. They're going to get in trouble. And the little kid, you're going to get in trouble. And then the other thing is about don't lose your senses. Focus on your job. Don't do anything that will cause you to lose your senses. I think the new part that's interesting is pervert the rights Don't pervert the rights. We have a lot of talk about that. We do have rights as Americans. We have a right to say what we want to say. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to worship. And we have other rights, big long list there in the Bill of Rights. And here, the mother is telling the son, don't pervert the rights of the common people, and can be applied to any leader in our country. Don't pervert those rights. God controls it all. He causes and He allows. We do not know the future of our country for sure. He can turn it in any direction He wants to do, but it's best to know that God controls. Back there in the file somewhere is copies of the state constitutions of the original 13. What is interesting is I believe all of them did not require anyone to join any group, but all of them said a leader had to believe that God will judge what they do. In other words, there was not a religious test for office. You didn't have to be a part of a certain group, but they did have to, as it started, believe that God is going to judge it. God is going to judge anybody who is a leader. And everyone who is a leader will give an account. I think that's how it started. Righteous leaders give stability to the land. In other words, it's a strong throne, not a tottering chair, ready to fall over. Righteousness exalts a nation, our verse. Exalt, promotes, gives rise to a nation. God controls and God will judge. And the musicians, please come.